Carlos, thanks for doing this. This is going to be, um, I, I want to be transparent about our motivations. We're trying to do something difficult. We're trying to make wage and hour law somewhat entertaining to the general public. So you'll listen to the podcast and then hire us when your boss stiffs you on the wages that you're owed. Um, so we'll see, to the extent we can do that. I mean, I've got plans, I've got ideas for how to do it, but I think maybe a good way to start, since you've been practicing in this area for some time, is to just hear some stories about stuff that you've dealt with over the years in this area. Why it's important, what people have to put up with, and how you can hold employers accountable for stealing from their employees.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Francisco. I, I think we spend so much of our time at work that to me, it's like the ultimate disrespect to not get paid for that time we spend away from our families, away from doing things, other things, resting, things we enjoy more. So that's kind of my motivation for going into this. Um, I can remember the first time I signed up a client. He actually worked at a metal recycling type business. He had actually gotten hurt at the job, and he had filed a workman's comp claim and had continued working despite having that injury, and it was still not getting paid overtime, and in fact was not getting paid any wages at one point, despite getting hurt and working, and then continued working without wages. And I remember distinctly that the employer never responded to the complaint. He didn't respond to the complaint.
They
Everything
just
got,
defaulted?
yeah, there was a default. A default was entered. So if you file a lawsuit, you have to serve the complaint. The plaintiff, the person bringing the lawsuit, has to serve the complaint, meaning hand it to the defendant. The owner of that business never responded. Was given the lawsuit. We got a default, and we waited the appropriate amount of time, and we had information about a bank account, and we froze his bank account. And what I didn't realize at the time was that he was using that business bank account as his personal bank account. And the only reason that he called me on that Friday afternoon, I'll never forget, is because his wife went to buy grocery and the debit card was declined. And she started asking him questions like, how do we not have money in the account? What's going on? She called the bank. The bank told them that their bank account had gotten frozen, and he realized it was because of me. And after that, he became very interested in this lawsuit and making sure that my client got paid everything, and he paid on the judgment and all those good things. But it took his wife going to the grocery store, trying to pay for her groceries and getting her debit card declined for them to take the lawsuit seriously. Um, so, like I said, these kind of crazy things that happen in this area of the law are just it's a lot of you know, human interaction, and sometimes there are reasons like economic reasons why these employers don't pay. Sometimes it's just simple greed that they realize that if they don't pay these wages, they'll make way more money and there's more profit in the business. There's one restaurant that I think I sued like 3 times for the same violations. And the last 2 times, the owner of the restaurant just paid. He just said, "How much do I owe? I'm gonna write a check and be done with this." But it's important for people who have been stiffed on that last paycheck, even though they say, "Oh, well, it's only $300 or $200." It's important that those people come forward, um, because it becomes a habit and a very bad habit, and it just really does affect the kind of the marketplace overall. We don't want employers, just in terms of a competitive balance, we don't want an employer not to pay overtime or not to pay wages, because it does, it's unfair to those other businesses as well as obviously the individual worker.
Oh, I don't care about the other businesses. I care about the workers. I mean, good on them for doing the right thing. I suppose they shouldn't be punished for that, but I don't know. I wonder if you share my intuition on this. Like, I am way more morally outraged by an employer stiffing a working class person on a few hundred or a few $1,000 for whatever reason. And I acknowledge this is irrational, than you being fired illegally, no matter how egregious the reason or how long it takes you to find a job. It's just like at a like an intuitive moral level, for some reason that gets me way madder.
I could see that. I see it. I mean, I think that a lot of these cases show a person's prejudices and a person's kind of classism towards their employees, that they think, oh, this guy's never going to come after me. He's not going to be able to recover. Like all the advantages are, on my side. That's where I see it most. I think it's an offshoot of, classism and probably some racism. Um, so yeah, I do get a little bit, indignant about the whole thing. Um, it's it's also really hard when you think about the worker, working from paycheck to paycheck, and how much better or easier their life would be if they got paid appropriately. A lot of my clients, they're working class, they're in these low wage jobs. They have a family, they have kids, and so, the what may not seem like large amounts, per paycheck, 200, $300 per paycheck. I mean, it adds up. And, that's, your kid being able to play soccer on a team, or, not feeling so tight at the end of the month after you pay your bills, or, maybe going out to dinner with your wife, or even just surviving.
Or maybe you can't pay rent. Maybe you
Right.
can't
Or
pay
maybe you
rent.
can't
Maybe
pay
you get
rent.
stiffed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so like it just that that does get to me. I joke with my assistant that I don't like meeting the families, because then I take it a little bit more personal. Like, oh, I met the kids. How could you do this to them? Um, but it's definitely a consideration. I get a little bit angry when the employer makes the defense that we're like a family here. I'm like, how would you screw over your family member like this? Like, this is not a family. But
Is that
yeah,
something? Is that something they told you?
oh
Because
yeah,
I mean, that's obviously not a legal defense. Like,
right. It's not a legal defense, but it's kind of like this moral defense, like you don't sue family type thing. And like I always think, how does this violation, and knowing that you're violating the law, equate to, a familial relationship? There's no way you wouldn't do this to your family. But
well,
yeah,
I bet you some people would. Um,
depends on the family member, right?
Depends on, well, yeah, like the rich father dies. There's an inheritance dispute. Those can get ugly.
Yeah.
Um, but no, I get what you're saying. I think it's a big red flag whenever an employer, and I'm sure some of these people are well-meaning, but whenever an employer says we're like a family here, it's like a run for the hills.
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure.
You're about to get abused at work.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think good good sets of policies and procedures are always a good thing for any sort of company, and the lack of those policies and procedures really, to me, kind of indicate where we're swimming. But yeah, one of the crazier intakes I ever had was a guy who worked at a pizza place really close to Northwestern. University, and I think that pizza place is actually really popular with the undergrads at Northwestern in Evanston.
Okay.
And
Let's maybe fudge some of the details so it's not about
yeah,
any particular case.
yeah, I'm just saying. So like
Yeah.
it was this place, and the brother owned the restaurant, and so his brother, his like biological brother, came in, explained the violations, and knew everything, obviously, because it was his brother, had all sorts of proof. And I told him, are you sure you want to do this? Not for legal reasons, but just like family get togethers, your parents are, is this going to cause problems within the family? And he said, we're, I'm 100% committed to this. I want to do it. I want to move ahead. This was like a Friday afternoon, and I said, okay, I'm gonna, it's Friday afternoon. I'm not gonna file this right now. I'm gonna probably file it on Monday. Um, so just to let you know, like you have a little bit of a time to think about this. And I get to the office on Monday morning. I'm working on the complaint. I'm working on some other stuff, and I get a call, and it's the guy, the intake from the Friday afternoon, and he asked me, "Have you filed that lawsuit yet?" And I was very tempted to lie to him and say I had, but I was like, "No, I haven't filed." And he's like, "You know what? I thought about it all weekend. I couldn't sleep. I decided not to file."
Oh my goodness.
So I saved the filing fee on that one. But
Yeah.
it's interesting, like kind of the respect factor that wages and getting paid really comes into it, right? Like it is a way of an employer showing respect to the employee by paying them appropriately. But yeah, I mean, I've seen all sorts of cases. I've seen the cases where it's 40 hours on the check and in cash they pay. I've seen instances where the 40 hour the first
So
40 hours,
40 hours on the check and then they pay the overtime straight time in cash.
yeah, straight time in cash. I've seen that a lot. I've seen the pay stubs say 60 hours, everything straight time, those very cut and dry cases. I've seen kind of crazy schedules where it was kind of like a split schedule almost, and the morning section gets paid in cash, and then the afternoon section doesn't get paid in cash. It gets paid, or the morning section gets paid in cash. The afternoon section gets paid in check. The and so they're never reaching 40 hours per week because it's kind of divided like this. Um, and so then it's a little bit harder to see the violation without seeing the schedule. Um, I've seen restaurants where they had various locations and they would send the worker to different locations in one day or one week and count the different locations as separate entities, even though they maintained one website. They shared supplies, they shared food, and so they would get
Oh.
paychecks, right? So it would be restaurant A and restaurant B and restaurant C, but they're all under the same umbrella. You would get a paycheck from restaurant A and a separate paycheck from restaurant B, despite working for that same employer. I've seen that happen. Um, I've seen a lot of like crazy cases, but at the end of the day,
Wait, so what happened in that case? Because like if they're technically different entities, maybe they have a way to wiggle out of it. I mean that one's kind of evil, but
right. Well,
um
so that's where you kind of do your homework and like you look at
yeah,
the website, right? And if it says, Tommy's Kitchen, right? And Tommy's has
yeah.
three locations, one in River North and one on the, west side of Chicago and one on the south side of Chicago. Like obviously they're not separate entities. And you interview the client, right? Like, do they
Yeah.
share supplies? Yeah. Do they share employees? Yeah, I'm not the only one who goes to various restaurants. Um, it was so one in one of these cases, they made the worker take his punch card to the different locations. So he would, you know, punch in restaurant A, work for 4 hours, punch out, take his card to restaurant B, punch in, punch out using the same card. And so obviously they're using the same accounting system and the same system to do
Yeah,
payment.
you couldn't ask for better facts.
But then, they would pay him with separate checks. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways to try to hide these things. Um, but they all kind of end up being very similar in terms of like they have to hide the fact that there's been more than 40 hours worked or something wasn't paid or vacations weren't paid or something like that.
Yeah, well, that one's like it's a little more evil because it's like you're not only did you stiff him on the overtime, but you constructed the scheme. Like you came
Oh
up
yeah,
with this like really elaborate plot to avoid paying overtime.
yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, no, some of that, wage and hours, some of it's pretty technical. Like
Mhm.
sometimes you'll be suing an employer and you'll be like, yeah, I think they probably just like screwed this one up in good faith. But there's a
Right.
lot of them that are just morally outrageous. And the funny thing about it is my sense is that it's probably easier to certify a class or a collective when the employer made like a technical violation rather than like sort of like, oh, this guy's leaving, so I'm going to steal the last check. Because that could be more ad hoc, right?
Oh,
They
for
may
sure.
not
Yeah.
they may not steal it every time. Um,
Right. It's only the guys I really don't like that I take the last paycheck from.
yeah, yeah, or like he left on a bad note, or like,
Mhm. He didn't give me 2 weeks
uh,
notice. I've had that a lot. The guy didn't give me
oh,
2 weeks
really?
notice. So I have to pay him the last week of wages.
Well, maybe
Yeah.
that's a policy. Maybe you could certify a class on that. The
Yeah.
2 week notice class.
Yeah, the 2 week notice class. Yeah. Um, I've also found that employers who believe the relationship is very temporary tend to have more of these violations. So, like,
Really?
there was a time where I had a lot of clients who were doing asbestos abatement, and the employer was, they would hire them for, 2 or 3 months to take the asbestos out of a building. And in those instances, definitely overtime violations, some, just wages not being paid. But I found that in those cases, because it was kind of project based and there was the possibility that I'm never going to see this guy ever again, that I felt like they felt more comfortable with committing the violations, and because it was kind of a set contract, they felt they needed to maximize what they were going to get out of it. So the workers ended up getting stiffed. Um, I found that as well. So,
What kind of company was that?
like I said, it was asbestos abatement. But
Abatements.
yeah, so they would take.
That's really dangerous work.
Yeah, it's
That's
really dangerous work, and your workers have to have special licenses and like all sorts of stuff. So these guys all had these special licenses. They were trained, they would have special equipment and everything. But like I said, it's project based, right? Like, you know, there's only so much asbestos in one building, and so that's where I found a lot of like violations. There was a period of time where I found a lot of those violations for those employers, especially because they were pressuring the workers to get the project completed early or on time, and so they would demand that they work overtime. But on the flip
they
side,
don't
they
want
didn't.
they don't want to pay the overtime.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, actually, that's a thing that I've noticed. I feel like a company's like measures of manager productivity can be a thing that's driving wage theft.
Oh, for
Like
sure.
if you have like, you want to keep costs near a certain threshold or get the thing done in a certain amount of time, I will see managers force people to work off the clock to make it look like they're more efficient than they are.
Right. Yeah,
So
for sure.
that's a common dynamic. And the other thing that kind of surprised me is like I said, it is a technical area, and when I went into it, I was thinking like, okay, nobody's going to be so stupid that they just don't pay time and a half for overtime. That's common knowledge. Everyone knows about that. You're just creating liability for yourself. It's shockingly common how you have like these really like straightforward cases. It's documented in their own payroll documents. Like people just don't do it. And I'm thinking like, what is it? Is it stupidity? Is it like malice? It's like I think we'll just probably get away with this. But that's one of the more surprising things about it is how many of the violations are just really obvious and like any competent person in HR would be like, we can't do this.
I mean, I think of it more as greed, but it's yeah, greed. And, you know, it's also like I said, you know, if you have a workforce that you kind of underestimate and you don't think that they'll ever bring a lawsuit against you, then I think these employers just feel like
So
they can.
who are these people? Who's getting underestimated? Who's going to be the most vulnerable to this kind of thing?
Oh well, and for in my experience, it's your lower wage, lower skilled workers. You know, your gardeners, your back of the house kitchen staff, um, uh, your you know like your construction workers who are not more specialized. You know, the guy who's cleaning up the construction site. I think the more skilled workers have there's a little bit more understanding that those guys know more. But I feel like your guys who wash cars, your car wash guys, those guys are the ones who I feel are the most vulnerable.
So it's
Um,
basically like the more exploitable you look and seem, the
yeah,
more likely you are to be a victim of poaching.
but I will say that there are people in more professional settings who have to bring these cases as well, right? Because if you work in front of a computer and do some sort of call center work or something like that, and they don't pay you for your computer getting ramped up, or like if there's something wrong with the machine, they short you or whatever. Like even in those environments, you have people who get stiffed on wages as well. So it's not exclusive to your lower wage workers, but in my
Yeah.
experience, it's been mostly them.
Yeah, yeah, or the other people who might feel more white collar and might have claims without even realizing it. I don't want to
Right.
go down this rabbit hole right now, but it's misclassified people. Like if you've been
Yes.
misclassified as exempt or
Yes,
as
for
an
sure.
independent contractor, those people can have claims.
For
Um,
sure.
but that's really technical and not as fun, so we'll stay away from that one for
Yeah.
today.
For
Um,
another episode.
Another episode, yeah. Well, I mean, there's like you could do like I feel like you could do like 10 episodes on that because there's like so many different exemptions. That might be
Right.
more like short videos. Um, well, yeah, yeah, I don't know. Like we're self-interested. We want those cases. Those cases can be worth a lot of money.
And also, I mean, those
Yeah.
workers tend to make more money, right? So there's,
Yeah.
the pot's a little bit bigger. But yeah, I think also one thing is I find that a lot of workers never look at their pay stubs. And, there'll be one guy who's kind of on it. He's kind of like the leader of the group. He's the one who gets everybody riled up. And then you talk to, worker 3 or 4, and he's like, I didn't even know that they were doing this until this guy told me. So that's one thing
Yeah.
I would always suggest to people: look at your pay stub. Like, does it seem odd? Like, are they taking weird deductions from you? Um, ask questions about this stuff because at the end of the day, it is your money as the
Well,
employee.
that's the other thing I want to do with this is like as much as I want to punish the bad actors, I do also want to educate people about some of the more tactical violations
Oh, for sure.
because
Yeah.
people may not realize that they're not being paid properly and they should be.
Right. Definitely. Definitely.
Well, this feels like a kind of a natural place to wrap up. I'm going to do my very best to make sure that this stays relatively entertaining because if we make this all about the 13 different exemptions under the FLSA, no
Oh,
one's
yeah.
ever going to listen to this. But I've got big plans for this. I think maybe we do some guests because there's people who write about this stuff. There's like professors and
Okay.
activists who are going to have great stories. So we're going to try to keep this as human centered as possible. But I really appreciate the war stories, Carlos, and we're going to start putting this out regularly.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, Francisco. Have a good one. Take care.
You too. Bye bye.